All right, welcome to our continued discussion on World War II. The last time that we talked about the World War II on the home front. We've mentioned Rosie the Riveter. We talked about victory gardens. We talked about rationing. We talked about the War Production Board. We talked about the Second Great Migration, the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, or the GI Bill, the Double V, and the starting of the Civil Rights Movement. We went through the internment of Japanese American with Executive Order 9066. We talked about the court case of Korematsu versus the U.S., which allowed this to happen even though it was a violation of civil rights. We talked about the United States deciding to focus on Germany rather than on Japan at the request of Churchill. Germany was seen definitely by Europe as the bigger threat, although we were more mad at Japan since they had bombed us at Pearl Harbor. We went over the battle for the Atlantic, and that involves the United States trying to get supplies over to the Allied nations, and the German U-boats blowing up American ships. Once again, used the convoy system. We looked at the map. We talked about the turning point for the European theater of the war, and that was the Battle of Stalingrad. From that point on, Germany is now in a defensive position rather than an offensive position. We said that during the Battle of Stalingrad, Stalin had begged Churchill and um, Roosevelt to come up with a way to distract Hitler so that they could regain the city of Stalingrad. And the United States came up with a soft underbelly plan. That was the idea that we were going to retake Italian conquest in North Africa and then go up through Italy. And then once we conquered Italy, from Italy we would go on to Germany. We were going to hit them in the gut. We talked about the Casablanca Conference that said that we were only going to accept unconditional surrender. When we left off, the United States had we had won North Africa, we had gone into Italy. Italy had wanted to surrender. They've kicked out Mussolini. And killed him, but they've kicked out Mussolini, but Germany is not allowing Italy to withdraw from the Tripartite Act. So our plan, we'll go back as thus. So we've got um, USSR coming in from this way. The Allies are now coming up from this way. And now we want to come in from a third way, so to really get Germany. And so the goal is at this point to pretty much squeeze Germany out. They won't have anywhere to get resources. We want to starve them out, and then we're going to attack them. Yes, this land remains free up here, and Germany will attempt to utilize that in their last attempt, the Battle of the Bulge. So the idea is that the Allied forces are going to free France, and then the Free French forces, led by Charles de Gaulle, the British forces and the American forces are going to push in that way through Germany. And the plan that we came up with is probably the most famous attack that comes out of World War II, definitely that most people are familiar with. I will show you clips from Saving Private Ryan that does a very good job of depicting what it might have looked like. And it is known as Operation Overlord, but you probably know it as D-Day. It was planned by General Dwight Eisenhower. He had been the hero in North Africa. He will again distinguish himself in the European battlefront as well. So the plan is to attack Normandy, France. And we did all sorts of things in order to sort of get the Germans off our trail. We made up fake plans, and we let those get out and then acted shock when Germany appeared to know them. The day that we attack on the beaches of Normandy, and it's not just Normandy, so everybody thinks that D-Day is just that one location. There's Omaha Beach. There's other beaches within the coast of France that the Allied powers land on. It's June 6, 1944. It is the largest amphibious attack in military history. That means land and sea. And here's some images from Omaha Beach. And imagine what you're doing. The idea is that you're going to get out of your duck boat and you're going to storm the beach, go up the beach, fight the Germans, and then go over I'm going to say the dunes, but that's because I can't think of another word right now. And I can't imagine the utter fear of getting out of the boat and massive machine guns being shot at you, but you don't have a choice. You can't stay in the boat. You're definitely going to die. If you go forward, you might die, you might not. The other way, these are more people landing at Normandy, and yes, in the height of battle, we even have photographs These are the paratroopers dropping in, and I always ask people, like, what would you rather do? Would you rather be a paratrooper or someone coming out of the boats? I've always picked paratrooper, not that I have a desire to jump out of planes. I just feel like that survival chance might be better, but I don't really know. So the day that we actually launched the attack was not a good day for an attack, and that's particularly why we picked it. It was a cloudy day. It wasn't seen as a good day for jumping out of planes, but we did that again to draw Germany off our trail. They were, of course, waiting for us because they were returning fire as Americans and and British forces were and French forces were landing. The losses at D-Day were extremely heavy. Again, we'll watch part of Saving Private Ryan, which is a wonderful film, yet rated R, so if you watch it, please ask your parents' permission beforehand. And so we win the battle at D-Day. We win Operation Overlord. America then goes on, or the Allies then go on to liberate Paris, France, and our plan to beat Germany is pretty much fulfilled. So the Battle of the Bulge is famous because it is Germany's last attempt to keep the Allied forces out of Germany. So essentially what Hitler was trying to do was he was trying to get access to these waterways up in here because he needed to do that in order to get resupplied for Germany that was now having serious supply issues because of the Soviets coming in from one way and the Allies coming in from this way. And if he felt like he could get out this way, he would be able to get reinforcements from other potential allies. That was his goal. That's not what happened. Here we go. The goal is for Allies to break the supply chain between that's going up through Belgium. We just saw it's December of 1944. It's called the Battle of the Bulge because the line actually bulges forward. That's why it's named that. It's not really after location. Germany loses and is now in retreat. So at this point, it becomes pretty clear to everyone within the German Empire, definitely the leadership, that things are not going well. The ability to win is pretty much non-existent. And so you see again at this point the idea, the concept of ramping up the final solution is still going on, and then the Germans begin trying to hide evidence. So they begin digging up mass graves where they had, before they were using gas chambers and just doing mass executions, they begin ordering the graves to be dug up, and they want those bodies to be burned as well in an effort to kind of cover up the extent to what they had done. They do burn and get rid of some paperwork, but because the Germans had taken such immaculate paperwork and such detailed paperwork and such detailed video evidence, there's no really way to hide the atrocity of what they had done with regards to the Jewish population and the Holocaust. And remember, it's not just the Jews. It's gypsies, it's Catholics, it's homosexuals, it's anyone that was deemed an inferior race within that are all massacred within the Holocaust. So now the Soviet Union is coming in through Poland. During this time, FDR runs for and wins a fourth term in office. The margin by which he runs is less than the margin by which he wins is less than the margin that he won in the previous election and then the previous and the previous. But he is our only president to run for and win. He is being win 4 terms in office. We will change the Constitution after his presidency to say that you can only serve 2 terms. So the Soviet army storms Berlin. That's the capital of Germany, April 25th, 1945. The concentration camps and the Holocaust horrors are beginning to be discovered. Once again, I have a phone call, of course, so I'm going to attempt to put this on pause. Please forgive me. Okay, so pause is over. Anyway, so what the German troops and the Allied troops are finding out as they begin to get into areas of Poland and former Czechoslovakia and Germany as well, and they see the camps, they're absolutely just flabbergasted, shocked, horrified, can't believe it. And during this time, the ramping up of what are called death marches begin. A death march is essentially what it sounds like. What the German troops were doing is they were trying to consolidate camps, and they would move Holocaust victims from one camp to another, but they literally would be required to march for hours and days on end, sometimes hundreds or thousands of miles. And if you died along the way, which was the ultimate goal, then the Germans were, of course, okay with that. And so one of the things that the Allied troops, and I think I had mentioned this in class, were most shocked about was that when they would bring people, local people that lived in the area where some of the camps were, and show them what was inside and what was going on, people, the local German or other citizens, couldn't believe it. And I think it's like something like your mind can't even take that kind of horror scene in, so you don't really know what to do. And a lot of the German citizens were accusing the Allied troops of setting it all up, as if, like, this couldn't happen in our own backyard. But of course, ultimately, we know that it did. So April 29th, 1945, Hitler and his now wife Eva Braun, they had married the day before. Hitler gives his last address to the German people, and essentially he blames the Jews for the failure of the Germans during the war. And then he goes into his underground bunker. So Hitler had a underground lair, and when I say bunker, it always makes me think of like this hole in the bottom of the ground. It wasn't. Like, it was a straight-on cinder block complex that looked like an apartment building. It was pretty nice. Like, it wasn't just a hole in the dirt. He kills himself. He shoots himself. Eva Braun takes cyanide tablets. They also poison their dogs. They want to make sure that the cyanide would work. And when Hitler is found, his body is found by Soviet troops. His body is identified, and then it's burned, and they get rid of it. And it's one of those things where there is some speculation of whether or not that was actually Hitler, and that is one of the conspiracy theory projects that people can do. So I'm just going to leave it on that. For our purposes, Hitler's dead. He kills himself. The end. May 8th, 1945 is considered the official end of the war in Europe, not in the Pacific. That is still going on, and it's known as VE Day, or Victory in Europe Day. Germany and Italy surrender. Japan is still hacking it out with the Americans and the Australians in the Pacific Ocean. Franklin Roosevelt dies of a stroke April 12th, 1945, so he actually never sees the end of the war. Harry Truman becomes president, and he is going to carry the United States through the end of the war and probably have to deal with the most difficult decision that is made in the war, and that's regards to the atomic bomb. We still have to defeat Japan. And what Americans had expected was, okay, now that Europe is over, since we had done European allies a solid, we had helped them out, we expected them to take all their resources and help us out in the Pacific, and that doesn't happen, and we end up a little unhappy about that, particularly the Soviet Union, because their proximity to the Pacific Ocean is obviously closer since it borders them. We sort of understood Great Britain really couldn't do that, and nobody was counting on France, and the lesser known allies, but really no one steps at the plate other than Australia, because Australia is there in the thick of it with regards to their location in the Pacific. This is a very famous picture from the end of World War II. It's taken in New York with a big ticker tape parade that they were having. The fun thing about this picture is these people did not know each other. This sailor was very just overcome with the excitement of the end of the war and the party, and grabs this nurse and full on deep kisses her. And she later said, even though it becomes like an iconic image of the end of the war and the celebration and the relief that Americans felt, that she was really kind of shocked because this random man had come up and laid such a kiss on her. No, they didn't end up dating. No, they didn't get married. She was just kind of like, what in the world has gone on? All right. War in the Pacific. So in the first 6 months after Pearl Harbor, Japan takes over the Indies, Guam, Wake Island, Solomon Islands, the Aleutian Chain, which is part of Alaska, Thailand, and Burma. Now, remember, many of those islands had been taken over within hours and weeks of the attack on Pearl Harbor. Again, what Japan is trying to do is they ultimately want to launch an attack on the west coast of the United States. But because of the distance between the United States and Japan, they need a stopping off point. They need a refueling point. They need a launching point. And they're trying to be able to acquire that. They never take over Hawaii or Pearl Harbor. They're not able to do that. They just bomb the snot out of it. But what they prevented us from doing is from launching major attacks on them, because we would have launched those attacks from Hawaii and from that neighborhood naval port, and we're not able to. Since they begin taking over our other options, we are sort of at a disadvantage when it comes to launching counterattacks on Japan, which is why Australia becomes such an important thing. December 1941, Japan goes for the Philippines. General Douglas MacArthur is in charge of the Philippines and the Allied forces. There's a massive battle for control of the island, and at one point when it looks like the inevitable is going to happen, and the Philippines are helping Americans fight the Japanese. Once again, we've promised them independence if they will help us keep out their attackers, and we actually keep our promise this time, so yay us. But when it becomes clear that the United States is ultimately going to have to give up control of the Philippine Islands, General MacArthur he leaves and he goes to Australia, and his famous quote is, "I shall return." And the idea is that he is going to come back, but he did not stay to the bitter end because they didn't want him captured. But many American troops are, and they're put on what's called the Bataan Death March, which is an 86-mile, I hope I got the mileage right, trek into what becomes the prisoner of war camps that Japan has, which are the only thing I really can make them in the equivalent to, would be equivalent to the Nazi Holocaust camps. What these men go through is unbelievably horrific. And so the idea is that the United States needs to get back to the Philippines because we need to free our prisoners of war. So the Doolittle raids are led by Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle. They are raids on Tokyo and other Japanese cities with American bombers. And we believe that if we begin bombing Japan, kind of like what Germany was trying to do with the bombing of Britain, that would, we would take out key military targets within Japan. We would prevent American deaths because we're doing it by Air Force, and Japan would quit. They don't. The Battle of Coral Sea, and I have a map, so this is Coral Sea right here. The Battle of Coral Sea is really kind of cool, if you want to talk about cool battles. It is the Americans, the Australians, trying to keep out the Japanese invasion. Here we go, would be Coral Sea. The Japanese invasion of Australia. It's a 5-day battle. What makes the Battle of Coral Sea unique is it's entirely by aircraft and aircraft carriers. So it's not a land battle at all. It is massive aircraft carriers and massive ships and airplanes battling it out with each other over the sea. The Battle of Midway. So the Battle of Midway, which occurs in 1942, and I really wish that it's June of 42, that I had done a better job of putting this up here. It is the turning point battle in the Pacific. What you need to note is that both turning point battles for World War II occur in 1942. The European theater occurs in 1942 with the Battle of Stalingrad, and the Pacific theater occurs in June of 42 with the Battle of Midway. So Midway Island was an island that we have gotten and was named specifically because it was literally in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Now, what Japan had hoped to do was pull another Pearl Harbor. They were going to surprise attack us at the island of Midway, and then once they took over that island, they were going to use that as the launching off point. But this time, Americans found out about it. And so rather than being the surprise-e, we were the surprise-ers. So when Japan attacked Midway, the Americans were ready. Japan lost 4 aircraft carriers, cruisers, and 250 planes. Again, it's considered the turning point because after this point, Japan is no longer gaining territory. They are trying to hold on to the territory that they have taken. So they begin a defensive war. Here, I'll come back to this map a lot. So island hopping. Island hopping is the American campaign, and our idea really is to go from island to island to island, taking back those islands that Japan had taken, and then the ultimate stop would be Japan itself. So America, I'm going to do a couple more slides. I know it said stop, but I am going to do a couple more. America lands on Guadalcanal. Guadalcanal is the first battle in the island hopping campaign, and if you look, it is right down here. And that occurs in 1943. After we win Guadalcanal, it marks Japan's first land defeat. And in 1944, General MacArthur returns to the Philippines for the Battle of Leyte, but it could be Leyte Gulf, and the U.S. wins. And essentially what you're seeing is, and you can see on this map, we are going literally from island to island to island, going this way, working our way from the Philippines up to Japan itself. And the Americans and the Allies are winning battle after battle after battle. General McCarthy returns to the Philippines. We take it over. Japan begins using their kamikaze, or their suicide pilots. They sink 16 ships and damage 80, but again, they ultimately lose, and America does liberate the Philippines. And I'm going to stop there. So make sure that you are reading AMSCO. Make sure that you are taking good notes during this lecture, because I'm not doing quizzes, because I really want you just to sit, listen, pay attention, and take notes. So tomorrow, or next time that we listen, we will cover the end of World War II. We will drop the atomic bomb, and then we will be done with our study of World War II. Over and out. Over and out.